So discussion is open. If there is some question for the panel, please feel free to. Or we have to start with online. If there is some question online, no, for the moment, no. Oh.
Sorry. Thank you for the great presentations. A question for any of you. So the idea of costs and sort of changing the nature of workflows, policies, and sort of cultural practices, social norms, how much of that is reallocating, recalibrating versus new costs? So, you know, Rick, your example of a librarian who's now managing the institutional repository, I think of that as a reallocation, right? So it's basically saying we're going to do less of, hopefully, we're going to do less of something and more of something. Is that a path forward in terms of addressing the sort of challenges, costs of new forms of publications in science?
Yeah, I think reallocation, I guess, is another way of saying opportunity cost when what you're doing is bringing in a new task and pushing out an old task, right? So that is a form of cost. It's not just you know, moving three things around to different places. It's taking part of one thing out so that you can bring in something new. And that's so when I think of reallocation, I would assume that that means moving the existing pieces around as distinct from bringing in something new and pushing something out.
Good morning. Thank you very much. My question is to the last speaker, actually, and to the last words that he said. Regarding the quality, you mentioned that quality is not cheap. You know that science cannot be estimated to say that it's cheap or expensive, as it is precious. My question is, what pushes you to say that quality is not cheap? Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I have to disagree. I think the reason that some people pursue $5 million grants and some people pursue $1 million grants is that different studies cost different amounts of money to do. It's more expensive to check your data twice than to not check your data. When work is done, either somebody is paying for that work to be done or the person who's doing the work is absorbing the cost herself. So yeah, I guess we just have to disagree on that.
Morning, and thank you for those presentations. That was excellent. Yesterday morning when I was driving here, I was listening to a podcast called Freakonomics, and which is the hidden side of everything. And he was talking about the theme was succeeding at failure. Succeeding at failure. And I wondered if that was a concept that you could apply to openness at the moment, and especially with your example in Benin, where you found there was a system, systemically it was failing on multiple levels, but actually you're succeeding because you looked at that failure and you've developed a work plan, action points. And so it's a change of mindset, I think, that would be quite helpfully applied to the open dimension. I just wondered if any of you had thoughts on sort of turning what we're talking about with openness and so many issues with the system and looking at that actually as you are on a trajectory to somewhere better than where we were before. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I totally agree with what you are saying. Is kind of the system is the most important in such development. So always better find solution adapted to this system, and that's why we prefer to look from what is the existing failure, and from that we can find some adaptive solutions. So I totally agree with what the postcard you were listening yesterday was saying.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think open science, I know it's often spoken about that it's been around for a really long time, but I think it is still in a state of transition and evolution, and that the only way we'll get there is by being brave and trying things, and they might not all work. As a publisher, we've absolutely tried to adopt that mentality, and we have failed at certain things. There have been unintended consequences of business models and open science practices. Some of them have been outlined by Rick today, but we've put models in place that we actually think, in hindsight, 3 years later, that's probably not sustainable or not something that is benefiting everybody in the ecosystem, but we tried it, so we'll pilot something else. And I think we kind of have to take that attitude in order to progress. Otherwise, nothing would change. I think it's a nice analogy.
I think of presentations, I think it would be kind of difficult not to mention generative AI as a buzzword. I'm curious, especially for publishers, knowing that Committee for Integrity and Ethics doubled, and not all research requires some kind of data collection and providing open data. How publishers are going to deal with this, how they're going to spot some kind of research done with the help of generative AI?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't think there's a simple answer at the moment. I think, again, it's a space that is still early days and is moving all the time. It's absolutely an area where I think publishers need to work together. I don't think this is something that just Taylor & Francis or just other publishers can solve on their own. And this is where the industry bodies like STM and COPE can really help, I think, to help set policy, help to develop tools and mechanisms to be able to take a kind of consistent approach to how we want to deal with this, but also to be able to recognize it. So there are tools being worked on in order to kind of advance our ability to spot this. Again, I think we need to partner with institutions to understand exactly what's being done there as well. But I would say it's kind of in progress. There's no kind of easy answer at the moment.
May I? Sorry, I want to be more provocative. It's not even a publisher issue. I was discussing with Prof. Kamel yesterday. Today, even in research, you see some grants application written based on AI. So what's the point? Finally, if we all submit grants based on AI, you cannot beat this kind of application written based on AI. So I think the problem is deeper than even with the journals or article based on AI. It should be a bigger thinking about these AI features and usage in science. I think it's a big matter. I don't have the good answer, but I just want to throw something in the sea. Thank you.
Maybe I can succeed with a question regarding the artificial intelligence. So I know that Elsevier has mentioned already some policies regarding artificial intelligence and ethics and copyright. So my question is for you, Caroline, is Francis Taylor is also launched some policy, especially regarding the peer review and tools used by artificial intelligence, because some issue about copyright and also about ethics and
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a formal position statement and policy on our website. So that's out there for everybody to see. And I think that's important that it is openly acknowledged what position publishers are taking. AI can't be an author on its own. Where AI is used as part of research, it has to be declared. So this again comes back to the transparency around, what tools have been used to analyze or whatever as part of the research. But yeah, we wouldn't accept a paper that AI is the author.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, of course, for example, in directory of open access journal, so we reject some journal because they put some article that GPT as co-authors. So it's not accepted. They put,
Yeah, we've had that too.
Yeah.
Listed as a co-author.
Exactly. Yeah.
Until AI develops the ability to pay APCs, I think we're.
Okay, good morning, and thank you for the beautiful talks. So my question actually is to Caroline, because I'm part of eLife's early career advisory group. Yeah, and as you know, like eLife has moved to this new publishing model where there is you publish, review, and curate. And as part of the ECAG group, we witness a lot of resistance to this model by editors, mainly senior editors. So I was wondering because I can see that the F1000 is fairly like similar. So did you encounter this resistance as well? And because and also, did you like see if there's more people preferring to publish via this model rather than the traditional model or not?
Yeah, that's a good question. So firstly, we know that there's strong evidence for kind of engagement with and attitudes towards open science that differ by career level. So Taylor and Francis ran a survey last year, which showed, I think it was almost 90% of early career researchers felt that the future should be open, their work should be open, which compared to a significantly lower statistic for mid-level careers and late stage. So I think that's kind of across the board. In terms of the model for things like transparent peer review, there are absolutely some challenges with this, and I think Rick outlined them in his presentation around things like bias, and particularly for early career researchers feeling that they can't be truly kind of critical of a paper of someone more senior. But we've actually had kind of a counter feedback to that, where early career researchers feel that being able to review a paper and have their name on it and get credit for it is something that they like and that they think is better as part of that model. And it also enables multiple reviewers to work together, because peer reviewing is a skill, and quite often that happens in a closed way. We know that senior researchers will quite often get early career researchers to do a lot of the review work, and then they never get credit for it. So actually, by opening it up, some of the feedback we've had from early career researchers is that absolutely is a positive, because not only do they get kind of mentorship and able to work with someone more senior on it, but then they also get that credit through having visibility. I wouldn't say that everybody thinks it's a better model, not at all. I think there's a real mixed set of opinions when it comes to things like peer review and publishing models. So I think that's where the sort of critical piece is, that we have these different options available, and that we do have, slightly different or newer options available for those who want it. But yes, there will be pushback from some researchers.
Thank you very much, presenters. My question about predatory journals. Some journals are good journals, others are clearly predatory, and yet others are in between. So my first question is, how can you differentiate, not you or me or anyone, how can we differentiate between the good and not the so good, and the ones that are in between, in particular when the citation has already been there in print and published, and when you look at the paper and say, oh, this is a predatory journal, this is a predatory citation, and data has been used that has no weight, but it has found itself into the final product. So maybe AI can do something here, or we human beings, we can do something here. Thank you.
I tell people that the fundamental difference between a predatory journal and a journal that just doesn't have very good editorial standards is deceptive intent. To me, the defining characteristic of a predatory journal is that it falsely presents unvetted science as peer-reviewed science. So they'll just publish anything you send as long as you pay the APC. Then they'll put it out there and say, here's a peer-reviewed journal article. That's the fundamental characteristic of a predatory journal. Legitimate journals exist across a spectrum of competence, right? There are very, very well-run journals and very, very poorly run journals. But if they are, in fact, if they are not misrepresenting the work that they do, to me, that's then not a journal we should call predatory or deceptive. It may be a not very good journal, but it's in a completely different category from one that is actively trying to deceive. I don't know. Would you agree with that, Dr. Dougnon?
Yeah, thank you. I think you are totally right. In this AIP report we published last year, I think you can find in that report the spectrum of the journals. You have, as you said, some journals that are clearly predatory journals, but you can have some legitimate journals, but with low quality standard. And that's why you can see some paper, when you read it, oh, how it happened to be published in this journal. Maybe something happened. So you see what I show in my presentation. This new decision in Finland, for example, those journals basically were not predatory journals, but I think they have some problem with the quality in the editorial policy. So something is weak there. So now they start being questionable journal, but they are not predatory. So it's two different items, it's two different ideas, even if sometimes they have a link somewhere. So with this report, we have the clear spectrum that define what is a predatory journal and what is a journal with low standard.
Yeah, I would agree with both of those points. I think just one thing I'd add on the publishers that don't set out to be predatory, and there isn't that intent there, but perhaps there are some editorial practices that we might recognize as linked to predatory publishing. I think this is where we do have a kind of self-regulating system, because actually what we've seen happen there is this rapid rise in publications, likely driven by the APC model and kind of the chase for revenue over quality in some cases. And researchers will stop submitting there, and funders will stop recognizing that as a place where you can use your grant money for. Institutions will not recognize that in evaluations. So actually what that does is kind of self-regulates those practices and requires publishers, even where they've perhaps strayed in editorial practices that are not recognized as top quality, to change. Otherwise, you will see submissions drop because the funding won't be there. So I think in that sense, that sort of the slightly more sort of on the spectrum rather than clearly predatory, that's where we see the kind of regulation coming in.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Olga Ayoub. I'm the head of library at the Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence. I don't have really questions, but I have some comments. Concerning open science, I think it really relies on the region. For example, in the EU, open science is very popular because most of the research is being funded by the EU, and it's really mandatory for the data and the research to be open. Same for the US, like National Institute of Health, if they sponsor research, it has to be open. In our region, you don't see this very popular, especially that not all institutions, they make it mandatory for their researchers to publish in open access journals. It's elective, it's still elective. And this also will make the number of open access or open science in the STM higher than the humanities and social sciences. So this is my first comment about open science. Concerning the open access model in Taylor and Francis, I would like to know if you are urging authors to share with you the open data. And if there's a plan for publishers in the future to start adding the open data as part of the article, for example. Concerning predatory journals, I think it's like any fraud. I mean, we're seeing a lot of fraud nowadays, online purchases, job offers, and this is part of it. But what's really surprising is that it's still increasing. Like with all the effort that we do in libraries and institutions to make our researchers aware of predatory journals, so people are still falling for it. And this, we don't know why. I mean, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Shall I start on the data question? So every journal at Taylor & Francis has a data sharing policy, but this is on a spectrum. So from the sort of most basic, which would just be a data availability statement that just says, if you want to access the data, this is where you can go, or here's my email address, or something like that. So you can't see the data, but you at least know how you could find it, right through to fully linked out to where that data is hosted and completely openly available. The majority of the journals started off on the sort of lower end of the spectrum, as it were, but we're actually seeing increasingly editorial boards and sort of journal communities wanting to try to move journals up that spectrum. As you would imagine, this is particularly in certain subject areas more than others. At Taylor & Francis, we publish a lot of humanities and social sciences research, and the most common thing we hear from researchers in those disciplines is, oh, I don't have any data. And actually, when you start talking to them, you know, they have these amazing, they've used video archives, or they've got performance art videos and images, and all of this really rich data that can absolutely, you know, we can say where that's held or how you can access it. So I think it is a direction of travel, even if not to make the data necessarily available and with all the kind of costs and things associated with that have been spoken about, but at least giving transparency on where the data can be accessed. So yeah, I would say it's kind of moving in that direction, but we're not at a point yet where it's mandated for every author.
Yes, we do have an online question. What about Vanity Press? Vanity Press bluntly claims that there is no review cycle and publish on the responsibility of the author.
Yeah, Vanity Press on the surface looks kind of like a predatory publisher, but the very big difference is that a Vanity Press doesn't claim to be anything other than a Vanity Press. So the publishing model for a Vanity Press is, if you want us to publish your book, here's how much it'll cost. We'll publish 100 copies of it. We'll bind it nicely and send it to you, and you can give it away to your friends. They are not pretending to offer peer-reviewed science to the world. They're just offering a for-pay publishing service. A predatory journal is offering a for-pay publishing service, but pretending to provide peer-reviewed science to the world. And that's the big difference between them.
Maybe last question for me to Dr. Rick is about the business model in scholarly publishing. As you are a specialist in scholarly publishing, which model you prefer or you advise? It's provocative. Of course, a diamond or
yeah, and I'm going to give a completely predictably fudging answer to that, and just say there is no perfect model. Yeah. Every publishing model, open or toll access or subscription or subscribe to open or whatever, every single one of them has a mix of upsides and downsides. And if you are engaging in a publishing project, you need to look at what are your sources of funding, what are your goals, you know, and how long do you expect to do this? And then you've got to pick the model that you think is going to work best for your project. One of the things that really worries me is the amount of rhetoric in our space right now about the transition to open access. We've got open access. Open access is already prevalent and is everywhere. Are we talking instead about a transition to a system in which open access is the only model allowed? that would really concern me. It seems to me that the future that we need is a future that preserves diversity in the scholarly publishing ecosystem and allows different projects to be funded according to different models based on their needs and their goals. If we say there is only one model that we are going to allow as an ecosystem, that's what worries me.
Thank you very much.